Good day, friends. So, first of all, I don't know if you can see it, but this Metatron's cube thing behind me is like flashing, and it must be from the sun coming through the windows, but it's pretty cool. I'll also take it to mean that today's video will be ultra inspired in some kind of way or assisted by the pantheon behind me. This is support video number 2 for the Dark Night process or Lent, whether you are in the Sunday gathering group in which I have invited us into a Lenten exercise that may or may not induce the actual Dark Night process, but is sure to be a learning and transformative experience nonetheless. Or if you're watching this in the future and seem to have stumbled upon the Dark Night for yourself, or are attempting to shift or release or surrender a particularly harmful or otherwise unevolved habit in your life or pattern. Christy actually reminded me when we were watching back the last video that I made that science or psychology or one of these fields is saying that 40 days is actually kind of a magic number to reprogram a particular pattern that you have. And it's interesting that that 40-day motif is found in many different sacred texts. And in the Bible, Jesus was quote unquote tempted in the wilderness or the desert for 40 days after he kind of got his download of enlightenment and before he started on his more public platform of ministry and teaching and healing. He was tested by the tester. Again, the devil, as I've told you guys before, in Greek is diablo, which simply means to throw against. So there are many different interpretations of Satan and now reptilians in the extraterrestrial conversation that we've brought into the mix. And the serpent that was there in the Garden of Eden, and actually in other traditions as well. I believe Mara in Siddhartha's experience under the Bodhi tree was, in fact, some kind of lizard like demon or apparition or experience. But in any case, the devil or Diablo, when it's used like that, is intended to mean a tester. And it's not always comfortable, but it is a positive and benevolent and beneficial experience or wrestling match. Also in the Bible, the devil is never allowed to test someone that God does not give him permission to test. Job is an amazing example of this. So, seen metaphorically or symbolically, God or higher intelligence or deeper wisdom along the process of the dark night or transformation of attachment is directing the whole show. And there's also a scripture in the New Testament that says God will not tempt you beyond what you can bear and will give you think the word is something like a shelter to stand up under. So God both initiates the test and gives you the means to pass the test. It's pretty cool. It's part of the process. So this 40-day thing is being kind of confirmed by psychologists and neurologists as a significant period of time where if you surrender or intend to change a habit that is somehow destructive or not serving your higher purpose, and 40 days is long enough to transform it or to release it or to let go of it completely. So I'd invite you, if you're watching this later and it's not Lent and it's not connected to what we're doing in Sunday gathering, to use these videos for support in that practice as well. So I actually have many possibilities of directions swirling around kind of in my mind for where to take this video, and I'm just going to follow the Metatron's cube and follow my inner impulse and follow my intuition and guidance as to which one to take. Lots of things to say about the Dark Night. Lots of things to say about this intentional period that you have either initiated yourself or life itself has conspired to place in your lap. Lots to say about suffering as well. Kind of neurotic or depressive suffering versus transformational or redemptive suffering. Lots to say about identity and attachment. Lots to say about trust in God or the unfolding of the path beneath your feet, even if you have to walk blindly or in the darkness. Eyes wide open in the darkness. I think the trail that I want to take is how the Dark Night or this Lenten or 40-day process of surrendering. And again, as I've said before, it could be like giving up chocolates or cookies or smoking or drinking or a certain kind of music or Facebook. And if you investigate appropriately, you'll see that it was never about that thing anyway. And after the root cause is transformed or uprooted altogether, then that thing is either received back in a brand new light or not even wanted anymore, and it just falls away, falls away, falls away. So throughout all my years of kicking different habits, I myself smoked cigarettes for about 3 years and never felt good about it, but knew that it was something that just needed to kind of live out its life. And when it was time, because I continued doing my practice, doing my work, when it was time for it to fall away, it fell away, no problem at all, effortlessly. Also, my sexual addiction, which I've shared with many of you through the work, eventually, there's no white knuckles necessary. The energy just transforms, and the hands are open already because you've been doing the work to open your hands to release and let go and investigate what that particular temporary relative feel good was trying to mask or cover up or satisfy, and it was never working anyway. So once the hands are open, then anything in the hands can just be blown away or received back in a transcendent, divinely infused, appropriate relationship with that thing. And some of them are just bad habits that will just go. They don't need to come back. But that's all up to you and your path and your connection with that thing and with God and your own dark night. Also, my obsessive compulsive habits, which have just fallen away, fallen away, fallen away. I don't know what my brain neural pathways looked like kind of before and after, but surely if I had been hooked up to a machine before and now, there would be a vast difference. I don't know much about neuroplasticity, I just know that it's a thing. You can, in fact, teach old dogs new tricks. But all of my kind of behavioral therapists or talk therapists or psychologists that I went to for OCD usually approached it from a mere behavioristic standpoint anyway. And the white knuckling or the just do something different or just don't do the thing that you're feeling compelled to do never worked. Sometimes, in fact, it was counterproductive or detrimental because the initial root problem was not addressed. Therefore, that kind of magnetic, holographic, projected reflection will continue as long as that, what I call nexus knot, is still there unresolved. And often it comes back with a vengeance. If you can kind of ward off whatever it was, my sexual habit or smoking a cigarette or OCD compulsions, if you successfully ward it off, sometimes to the degree with which you ward it off or for the same amount of time that you ward it off or with an equal corollary to the force required to push it away and not do the behavior, and for the same amount of time that it stays gone, kind of ebbing or waxing away or waning. I don't know if I'm using the right words. You get the idea. That same degree or more, exponentially more, would the tsunami come back. With a vengeance. So that's why I'm not inviting you into an approach of just choose a healthier snack. On the relative plane, that's great. It's good to stay healthy. It's good to eat well. But in the dark night, in this true process of healing the wound and liberation and doing the work and the 5 basics, the old rules simply do not apply. What all of the articles and research say about health and not health does not matter. If you're supposed to learn a lesson about something, you will. And when I say learn a lesson, it's all very positive. Don't think reward, punishment, or if you're learning a lesson, you did something bad, get rid of all of that guilt stuff. For ultimately, none of us know why we're here anyway. None of us know where we came from. None of us know where we're going or what's next. We make some kind of meaning or purpose about this place, even about suffering. I think Friedrich Nietzsche said something like, the best thing to do with suffering is to find meaning in it, not to try to get rid of it, which comes from his kind of nihilistic perspective, a little pessimism spiced in there, but at the same time, there's some truth and some wisdom in it. Don't try to make all the experience go away. Try to incorporate and make sense of and put some meaning, even if arbitrary, even if ultimately meaningless, to your suffering, to this human experience. Because the first kind of realization or recognition or tenet of Buddhism is this world or this human thing brings suffering, period. It's a similar but loosely correlated parallel to the first thing that you're supposed to acknowledge in the magic, mythic, fundamentalist Christian world is, I am a sinner. It gets so taken out of context, but it's an interesting, sober start to the journey. Don't get the liberated cart before the horse of recognizing your humanness, the suffering inherent here. And the Jesus, or the truly deeply contemplative Christian understanding of suffering, is deeply, highly, profoundly transformative, straight through it. And then the kind of Buddhist understanding of suffering is this cool detachment. To the contemplative Christian, suffering is something that you welcome and proceed boldly into, and know that on the other side of it is, quote unquote, resurrection or new life. The Buddhist understanding of suffering is, yes, accept that it is a thing here while you're here, and that it's something that in its neurotic form should be avoided. And here's how to avoid it. Beautiful juxtaposition and different flavors of suffering and what it means, where it comes from, what to do with it. So if we're not approaching this merely behavioristically, because I'm telling you it doesn't work, and if you do only want to take it on the surface and just change some habits in your life and have a healthier snack so that you can lose some weight, or don't look at Facebook so much so that you can be present with your friends and family more in person, that's fine. But I'm pointing somewhere deeper here. I'm saying let's go for the jugular. Let's go to the deeply rooted identity. Remember our 3 from the support video number 1. Identity, happiness, or kind of like future expectation in something that can change or be taken away from you. Which leads me to where I kind of want to take us for this video, which is relating all of this that we're talking about to the 5 basics. In particular, it doesn't mean this is the most important one, because I don't give more weight to any of them. They're all equal in my mind and in no particular order. But in particular today, how this all relates to the ultimates and also the others, because they all always interrelate. So, along with the inevitable suffering of this human experience, and I'll say in parentheses, for now, so far, at least in this Kali Yuga, as they say, the last like 6,000 years, it's kind of been the same. More of the same, more of the same, more of the same. The teachers have come to try to alleviate suffering globally, planetarily, but mostly the liberation and the alleviation of suffering and the healing and the transformation through suffering comes in small little pockets and per individual who takes up the path. In maybe the golden age, which is either coming next, coming up soon, or thousands of years ago, in these cycles that the Vedas talk about, maybe it's different. But at least in our current generation, we'll say, or iteration of humanity, this is how it's been. We're still talking about Buddha and still talking about Jesus and still talking about Muhammad and still talking about these enlightened masters here thousands of years later, but globally, and they are still changing lives and affecting and inspiring people. That's a whole other thing I'd like to say about if they are still on their process of transformation through the densities, like in their way up in ninth density now, then how much more has their presence and power and the quote unquote Holy Spirit on earth been increased for us to draw on now? Time and space are different, of course, in those realms, but relatively speaking, now, X number of years later, would they not kind of like a positive wave or accumulated tsunami assist us even that much more? Just an interesting thing to consider. If they are still alive holographically and going through their process, even Jesus told Mary Magdalene, "Don't cling to me, I'm not yet complete with my journey." Then where was his journey taking him? And is he still here helping us far beyond the 33-year-old human that was here, far beyond how he was 1,000 years ago, far beyond what he was 500 years ago? Where is he now in the densities and in our Akashic holographic relationship with him? It's pretty amazing, pretty profound. So, what the dark night process, when it is the actual dark night template and not just a depressive time in your life or a challenging time or a midlife crisis that you don't use for transformation, is begin to retrain your conditioning to a new way of being and seeing. That's paradoxically already here, already active, in fact, but it's just kind of buried or obscured or darkened or eclipsed. So, because suffering is just the way of the day, and not only that, in this Kali Yuga, in these last 6,000 years, which was the context in which these other beings that I'm talking about existed and taught in and taught from. So they are our brothers and our sisters because they were understanding. The conditioning, for whatever reason, and there are some possible reasons, whether they call it original sin or the elite powers that be, that are kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes and don't have our best interest at heart. This whole rabbit hole consideration that Christy and I are bringing to you guys. Conspiracy, no longer theory. Why is there suffering? We ultimately don't know. But now that it's here, it can be used for transformation. That's what I'm saying. And in this tightly squeezed Kali Yuga, or the darkest of the dark ages in the cycles, here at the quote-unquote end times, one of the qualities and characteristics is that we are over-identified and over-conditioned to believe that our happiness comes from and that the real world is. So real world, over-identified with, and happiness comes from this gross, waking, physical, personality, self, body, brain, organism. And all of its desires and attachments and meaning and interpretation and ups and downs and duality, that's who we are. That's what's real. That's where happiness and conversely sadness comes from. Check out that beam of light across Jesus there. This is good. Metatron flashing, beam of light across Jesus's face and mouth. Thank you, guys. And if we're relating this conversation to the 5 basics, then we'll remember that in a meditation practice, which is one of the basics, and corollary to the brainwave states of sleep and waking that we go through naturally every 24 hours, then there's a different, and this is becoming scientifically proven and accepted as well, but it's been known since ancient times in spiritual traditions, that there's a different and unique body, mind, self, relatively speaking, which then ties into our basic of the relative self, taking responsibility, finite self, projection, shadow work, and who am I not? So who am I relatively in the waking state is this body-mind persona. Who am I relatively in the dreaming state or the theta realm of meditation is another body-mind persona. Who am I in the causal realm or deep dreamless sleep is a different body-mind kind of persona. There is a causal body, in other words. And the relative texture or fabric or experience in each one of those, whether it's the natural sleep-wake cycle or on the meditation cushion, is different. There's a relative sense of I and self, and even, yes, body. This body that you can slap and hit and bumble around is only slappable and hittable and bumble aroundable with other things at the same vibratory density. So the subtle body can move, the causal body can move and feel. This gross physical body is not the only quote-unquote real body. It's just the gross physical body. We're just, for some reason, over-identified with it and as it for understanding meaning, interpretation, who we are, and happiness. But the more you become proficient in meditation and tune into the kind of mysterious questions around sleep states, like, oh yeah, I'm not this exact same body-mind persona when I'm dreaming. I'm a different one, but it's still me. Who is that one? There's still a texture of I that changes depending on the state, even depending on the kind of emotional state in the waking world. The I or the self that you are when you're sad is a different one from the one when you're happy. This is all relative, but it's important. And now, the reason that I'm able to say this to you and you're able to, at least in theory, understand what I mean is because there is an ultimate I or witness or self that maintains constant awareness or presence behind, through, and as all of those relative changes and I's. And for me, it has become easy to tune in to that ultimate I, regardless of the state. Waking, dreaming, deep sleep, emotional, mental, frustrated, angry, happy, sad, joyful, calm, chaotic. The same I, the same presence throughout. But as it relates to the dark night, and this, if I'm to project a guess onto why, one of the primary purposes of the dark night is to drop you into that ultimate state of I amness, or selfness, or presence, or awareness, that's always there anyway, but was so eclipsed by your reaching and grabbing and meaning and interpreting and identification with and conditioning of all the changeful things, in particular, the waking, gross realm changeful things. So because we're so identified with the taste buds or all the five senses, then when we eat something, we forget that there is one behind the scenes, so to speak, and at the same time imminently, intimately present, tasting that, but already satisfied, that itself cannot be tasted. So we think that taste is satisfying something, especially if it's trying to fill a void of loneliness or boredom or sadness. Meanwhile, this ultimate one is always already full and complete in and of itself, and is allowing you to go through your experience of suffering, of needing, of crying, of indulging, of binging, of purging. And because of its ultimate infinite patience, and that's where our kind of anthropomorphic ideas about God and language that we use about God can be useful. Like, God is ultimately patient and is always there, ready when you're ready, but will never force your hand. It's beautiful language like that. But if we're talking first person phenomenological ultimate awareness, then that self that you are and have never not been, through all the changes of the relative finite self, is there waiting to be even more activated and to kind of catch you as you, in you, when the dark night dawns, or when the conditioning or over-identification with the gross waking body-mind world and the five senses, parentheses, which is why Patanjali has this whole layer that is so overlooked. Nobody knows that it's the dark night, but it's called pratyahara, which means withdrawal of the senses, the other side of which is the deeper and higher contemplation, rungs, quote unquote, so to speak, on the ladder before union with God or samadhi or oneness or enlightenment. All the ones before pratyahara or withdrawal or transcendence of the senses are very time-bound, body-bound, dualistic, laced with effort. And whatever comes in through the senses, through the physical eyes, and we can include through the physical, normal waking brain, mind, self, through the nose, through the ears, gets interpreted as good or bad, wanted or not wanted, positive or negative, and we respond to it and react to it as such. Eventually, that gets boring. Eventually, that gets old. Eventually, that runs dry. And if you don't know that there's a higher way, then you will become depressed. And you might even plummet further into deeper destructive habits and patterns. That's why I say there's a fork in the road. I talk about this fork in the road between despair and recreation in my chapter in Water Still called The Alarm Clock That Makes No Step, The Alarm Clock That Makes No Sound. There's a fork in the road of choice. And because this ultimate self or I amness is always already there, it just sort of needs your cooperation or permission to kind of take over. This is all, again, anthropomorphic language, but it's the best we can do with the ultimates, because anything said about the ultimate automatically contradicts itself. But in any case, it needs your permission to now be even more activated or the dust brushed off of it. And what you see when either you surrender a habit or an identity that you know was not working anyway, and you know was laced with possibly more suffering than happiness or satisfaction, when you surrender that and see what happens instead, and not just white knuckle and hope it goes away, or when life itself takes you to that precipice or takes you to the edge and asks you to jump off the cliff, that which you are is all that's left, and that which you are not is finally gone. So again, as this relates to a meditation practice and meditative states, what really started tuning me into this ultimate witness was actually in the causal, formless, void realm of meditating. Because there's an undeniable, even though there's kind of a relative sense, a causal body texture experience, the one still witnessing and observing that was absolutely undeniable. There is no body arising. There is no Kemper arising. There is no world arising. There are no thoughts arising. There is no meaning arising. There's no interpretation arising. There's no judgment arising. There's no suffering arising. There's no happiness arising. And yet I am. I used a word in the support video number 1. I said, it is excruciating to go through the dark night process. It's only excruciating to the time-bound, over-identified body-mind, to the one that won't let go. But in fact, that one that is ultimately present in the causal realm and therefore in all realms and all states, which is why then I took it from there and was able to tune into it and be it as it always. The surprise and the spoiler alert is that texture of I-ness, which you always already are, never have not been, is irrefutably sweeter than any piece of candy. More satisfying than any conditional feel good. And it's experientially so. Once that is seen and felt and known, it's even easier to let go of the conditional world, of the gross waking world, and want to go back there as often as possible, not only to the causal realm, but to be in that place as much as possible, as often as possible, even though paradoxically you're always already there. But to be aware of that, it brings people to stillness. Whoa, all of the moving, all of the action, all of the thinking, all of the doing. And all of that combined with the conditioning and the attachment to it has been eclipsing this place and has been poisoning my tongue, so to speak. And in the dark night, that place is all that's left in any state. That self, that I amness, that beingness, that union with God, which you always already are, is the only thing you can taste. And it only takes time to the conditioned relative finite self to understand none of the others satisfied anyway. And that actually I can taste this always. And everything else was simply getting in the way. You have no other choice. So, the dark night is a reconditioning to the unconditional. You can cooperate with it, you can induce it, or life will force your hand, or God will send the tempter, the tester, and will also provide the way out. If you take the fork in the road to recreation and not destruction or despair. So that which is left is that which has always been. But everything else has been placed on top of it as a distraction. That's just the way of the game right now. I don't know why. So when finally you feel like nothing of the world satisfies anymore, or when you give yourself permission to see that that's always been the case and don't reach for the next thing, or when you're simply brought to the inability to reach for the next thing, if you've chosen the path of transformation, then you deeply know inside, even if you have a partner or a family or close loved one that sees you kind of going through this and they feel sorry for you and try to take care of you and make you feel better, you know that you actually don't want their help. And bless their hearts, it's fine. You don't have to be a jerk about it. But what's being experienced inside is infinitely sweeter. There's actually my favorite, or one of my favorite Christian musical groups to this day, Shane and Shane, have a song that says, "Your name is sweeter than honey on my lips." It's exactly what we're talking about. This experience of drying out the senses or everything else that used to be imbued with duality and meaning and happiness laced with sadness. This place is infinitely sweeter, experientially, than the sweetest dessert that was masking the pain and the emptiness anyway. It's ultimate emptiness because it's full in and of itself. It's vastly present and intimately connected. And so sometimes the dark night brings you kind of to what looks on the outside like lethargy or lack of motivation or depression. Don't reach for the pharmaceuticals. Don't reach for the supplements. Again, the old rules no longer apply, and you're being taught to see and feel with new eyes and senses, truly. So you can explain it to your partner. I really don't need anything. And that's the good news. For once, I don't need anything. I may look like this for the time being. Trust me, the spirit of life in a resurrected sort of way will fill your body, your mind, your personality again. At the same time, you don't care so much if it never does because there's something going on in the deeper recesses of your being. And you can't even put your finger on it, but you know it. It's that which is left when the world goes away, and it remains when the world comes back again for the first time. And if I need to bring in the final basic, because I hit all the other four of the interior domain, it's simply that this is part and parcel of the interior domain. It's not the exterior. If this were a journey on an exterior expedition or rock climbing or something like that, there may be a similar like dark night process on the exterior where they have to go without food for X number of days or something like that, and are rewarded on the other side with a big banquet when they finish or something like this. The dark night of the soul is in the interior domain. Don't reach for the next thing. Let this process work on you. Because though it brings your hand to it, it will also give you permission to go back to your regular life. But when you have a window of opportunity imbued with grace and divinity and true and ultimate meaning such as this, why not take it? I'll say again, you didn't come to this planet to engorge yourself with food. You didn't come to this planet for your career. It's a very shallow or relative version of this, where people say things like, oh, I know I'm going to have to get rid of all of this one day when I die, so why not enjoy it while I'm here? It's just not what I'm saying. Because while you're here, There's something deeper than even that to enjoy that is lasting beyond here. Keep up the good work. When you're no longer able to reach, when what once tasted good and sweet no longer does, turn your attention to that which is left, who you are after that. And when the conditioned relative finite self no longer has any meaning, can no longer even be identified with, who are you when that one dies? Don't miss it. It's subtle because we're not taught to see it. Then the subtle becomes obvious. Some are brought to this on their deathbed. Beautiful. Some are brought to this when a loved one dies. Beautiful. And this is not just an optimistic band-aid for when tragedy happens. It's a transformative template and the shelter to stand up under when the test comes. The test to see if you're willing to go to deeper waters. Where that which you always already are is immensely satisfying. And that immense satisfaction was just being covered up by all the trivial pursuits. Who are you when the trivial pursuit is done? Can you dare to let go of it now? And the squirming, the fighting, the friction is surrendered into a deeper presence, higher intelligence than you as you've been conditioned for all these years. That's why the God language as an other intelligence beside yourself is very accurate. Or the deepest sense of I that is other than your personified I. What remains to watch? The changes. Happiness, identity, meaning in something that cannot be taken away or change. And it's not just an insurance policy, it's the truth of the truth. And we all come to it by our own path. And as I say in the organic, non-GMO, fair trade enlightenment video, the body's still here. The mind is still here. Kemper is still here. Desire is still here. Passion is still here. Feeling is still here. Pain is still here. The human struggle is still here. Existential angst is still here. But it's all transformed, liberated. Everything is different. And there's a sweetness, a richness beyond the taste buds. And whatever the taste buds represent for you. And then there's just a stillness. It's always been here, but now you know it. And the body no longer wants or needs to be running around. Practically, logistically, things continue. You know what you have to do. You know who you have to take care of. But there's a deep, abiding joy in just being here. The stillness of being and presence is not conditioned by or conditional upon or dependent on relative movement or not movement. But at the same time, a relative stillness reflects the ultimate stillness, is a manifestation of or an expression of ultimate stillness. And the body could just sit here and not move and not do anything. Because it has become kind of subdued by that which doesn't need to move, that which has never moved, that which doesn't do anything and holds all the doings and all the things in its steady, gracious, compassionate glance. And that's directly experienced here, in, through, as, by all the layers that you are. And it's no longer just a state that comes and goes, no longer just a theoretical possibility or a peak experience, but it becomes who you are, how you are, everywhere you are. It gets translated through how you eat, how you think, how you respond, how you see, how you hear, how you feel. The one looking through the one looking at me now. That's it. Sometimes all of this simply blocking that. It intercepts everything. And so in the dark night, or the 40-day experience, when this dies, there's no obstruction. I've talked myself into that place right now, if you can't tell. And I could disappear into sitting here with you for another forever. And instead of saying, I'll leave you with that for now, I'll say, I'll be with you with that for now. I love you guys. Namaste.